Due to a few instances of salty language, listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Supernaughts, everybody, fandom's only debate show. With us tonight is that madman from the South, RJD.
Hey, everybody.
Also joining us is acclaimed author, Scott Colbert.
Hey, you said acclaimed author, and I didn't think you were talking about me. I thought somebody else had joined, but hello.
All right, boys. Topic 1. Best comic book movie that isn't Marvel or DC. Scott, go.
Okay, I had to think about this for a bit, and I would say my favorite non-Marvel or DC comic book would probably be V for Vendetta. Hellboy and Hellboy 2 kind of pulled up the rear, but there was something about V for Vendetta, I think mostly just the source material. I really, really liked the comic book that Alan Moore did. In fact, I think I probably like it better than Watchmen.
Wow.
So that would be my pick.
RJD, over to you.
I thought Watchmen was a great adaptation, and sometimes at times too slavish adaptation of the book. The book is one thing, the movie's another thing. They could have taken a little liberties. But since you said comic book movie, my favorite is A History of Violence. I love that film, and I understand graphic novel. Graphic novel is a big comic book, folks. That's the definition. And A History of Violence is solid. I love Hellboy, and I love V for Vendetta, and Watchmen's very good. But my all-time favorite is A History of Violence. Cronenberg, Vigo, can't go wrong.
And Watchmen, I think, was DC anyway.
Bingo!
Oh, that just puts Scott in the lead. All right, topic 2. If England and Scotland get a divorce, who gets custody of Bond?
Bond's English. Bond's got to stay in English. I know he was born in Scotland, but he's got to stay in England.
Yeah. Scott?
And I don't really care who has custody of him at this point. You know, all the good movies are done with, so who cares?
All right.
A Sean Connery fan, I imagine.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but more Roger Moore, because he's the one that I grew up with.
I think everybody knows I'm a Roger Moore fan. And Roger Moore was my favorite for many reasons, but number one, because Roger Moore was English. And that's what England means to me. James Bond, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath.
All right.
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, like I said, you know, he was the one that I grew up with, and you know, he was the Bond that I saw in movie theaters. And you know, you can look back at something like Moonraker now and look at how campy it is, but you know, back when it was released, I mean, it kicked all kinds of ass.
Yeah, we had a whole month of Bond, and Moonraker was much maligned. But if you look back, Moonraker made all kinds of money when it came out, and there's not a whole lot of stuff that was released back then that stands the test of time. And you know, Roger had his time, but for his time, he was an amazing Bond. He was a great Bond, and he's always my favorite.
I have to agree with that.
Oh, look, we got a consensus. All right. All right, so let's move on to topic number 3. Orion Pictures is back. Looking back over that, you know, troubled studio, what was their best release? Scott?
That's a good question. I would have to say Excalibur. I believe that was an Orion release, wasn't it?
I believe so.
because that's the only one that I can remember off the top of my head. But Excalibur, I saw Excalibur. I was 16, and my soon-to-be brother-in-law and his friend and his friend's brother, we all went to see this one night, and I just remember being blown away by this Arthurian epic, and Nicholas Campbell as Merlin just really absolutely nailed it. And it's one of my favorite fantasy movies ever made.
It's a good one. D or RJD, best
I
around.
man, I just love Excalibur. It's one of my favorite of all time, and I'm gonna have to agree with Scott. I will say that if you look through their catalog, there's some great ones. I'm going to mention a personal favorite of mine, starring one of my favorite actors of all time, Burt Reynolds in Sharky's Machine, filmed in Atlanta, Georgia. Sharky's Machine is a really gritty crime film. It's not epic like Excalibur. Excalibur is one of the best fantasy films ever made. But Sharky's Machine is a really solid, gritty crime film filmed on the streets of Atlanta. And it has one of the last and greatest stunts in it, where a man jumps out of the top of the Peachtree Plaza and plummets to his death in the film, but in real life he fell on one of those giant airbags, and it's pretty incredible. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I would recommend that to anybody. I'm probably gonna get the tail end of this particular exchange, but I do love Excalibur. I could have went with um, some of the Chuck Norris films too, like the Lone Wolf McQuade film, which almost basically gave us Walker Texas Ranger, in a more G-rated form. But I'll take the loss here on this round.
Mm.
I'm actually looking through a list of the Orion movies, and holy mackerel,
Yeah.
there's a bunch. They Hotel New Hampshire, um, which was panned by the critics, but it was actually one of my favorite John Irving novels, and I thought the adaptation for the movie was pretty good. I mean, where else can you have a movie where Rob Lowe and Jodie Foster play brother and sister and end up having sex?
Oh.
That's great, man. That's great. It's the company that brought us Caddyshack. It's the company that brought us First Blood.
It's the
Um,
company that brought us RoboCop, you two.
oh man,
That's right, RoboCop,
for shame on both of us.
the Terminator.
But it was also the company that brought us RoboCop 3. Sold Mrs. CC Pounder some carpet back in the 80s. God bless her soul, even though she's still alive. Great actress. Horrible
And
film, though. RoboCop 3, horrible film.
Flesh and Blood too, one of
Mm.
my favorite Verhoeven movies.
Jeez. Oh, God. Scott, we're going to just have to do fantasy podcast where we talk about all these great fantasy films.
Yeah, and I never actually really thought of myself as being a big fantasy fan, but apparently I'm a bigger fan than what I thought. So
That's a really, really good fantasy film if you don't like fantasy films. None of the regular cliches are in Flesh and Blood, and it's dirty. It's like all the fantasy films are always riding around and they're clean. They're not clean, and I mean metaphorically and literally, they're not clean in Flesh and Blood.
yeah, it's exactly how I pictured that era in time. Just shit on the streets and mud, and women with their tits hanging out of their corset. I mean, that's how I picture the Middle Ages.
Jennifer Jason Leigh's finest performance.
Two of her finest performances.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah,
So, Orion Pictures. Excalibur for both of you.
yeah.
Yeah,
This is we're agreeing far more than we're disagreeing.
Yeah.
yeah, but we don't have to disagree. You just give whoever you think made the best point, but I'll have to. I'll have to. I'm gonna go with Sharky's machine. That way you have to worry about it. I'm gonna go with 10. Damn it, 10.
Oh wow.
10 was probably the first movie that I saw a breast in, but then Excalibur was probably the first time I saw a breast and actually did something to it.
Oh, you just lost a point there. That's for sure. I don't. No one needs to
Yeah.
see that.
Don't
No
take my
one.
baby
No. No.
off.
Oh.
Hey, Helen Marion, if you hear this, I will pick you up Friday night. You still have it, woman. You're beautiful.
Oh God. Let's
I
move.
might
Oh no.
I might play Excalibur before the date, but you're still beautiful, Helen.
We're gonna move on now. Let's move on to the next point.
Good idea.
Okay.
Good idea.
All right. Topic number 4. As you may or may not know, Metacritic took a lot of heat this week for user reviews involving Destiny. Lots of ones, lots of tens. If opinions really are like assholes, do we have to see every single person's opinion? Do user reviews matter at all? Scott?
This is kind of an interesting question because user reviews, I tend not to pay attention to them for other things. For my book and my work, I look at user reviews. You know, sometimes it's a good gauge of if I'm doing something right that people like, or if I'm doing something wrong that people just can't take. Having said that, by and large, I think most user reviews are worthless. They're absolutely worthless.
RJD?
Well, I remember the controversy where you had Toy Story 3, and it was going to be the first trilogy to have a perfect score, and you had two critics that scored it less than perfect, and the scuttlebutt was they scored it less than perfect so they could get attention. So my take on this is uh, if you're if you're giving it a 1 or if you're giving it a 10 because you're trying to skew it, or if you're giving a particular review to get attention, you're better off just keeping your mouth shut. And
Yeah,
companies ought not to they ought not to give credence to someone who is trolling with a 1 on a film that may be a 6 or a 7, or someone that may be involved in the picture, or maybe pushing a certain film with a 10, which is clearly a 5 or a 6 kind of film. Back in the day, we, we would we would do averages, and you could grade on a curve, and you could drop off the top two and drop off the bottom two, and we use things like common sense. And it seems like sites like Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic and some of the other sites, there's no more common sense. And internet opinions and reviews are full of hyperbole. And sometimes it's better to just kind of just use a little Kentucky windage, watch the trailer, and go find out from yourself. Because if you read 5 reviews, you're probably not going to agree with 2 or 3 of them.
yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. I know back in the day, you know, before the internet, the only thing that we had to rely on were the local paper reviews, and obviously at the movies with Siskel and Ebert, and a couple other you know TV reviewers, Gene Shalit, Joel. I forget his name, but he's Joel Siegel. So we didn't really have a whole lot to to go by other than maybe five or six things. And now everybody has an opinion, whether they've seen the movie or not, whether they've read the book or not, or whether they've played the game or not. They're gonna have an opinion, and I see this dynamic at work on the app stores like for Apple and Android phones. You know, people just love to give one-star reviews because a game doesn't do what they think it should do, or an app doesn't work the way that they think it should work. And there's far too many opinions based on ignorance, not based on um, actual experience.
Well, I blame the society we live in. Everybody wants to have a say so, and so you have TripAdvisor, or you have man, I can't remember one of the other sites, and it all stems back from Amazon. And I've been involved with companies who've had negative reviews from customers on sites, and this customer's a phantom. They don't exist. You can't find them in their database. So you wonder, is it the neighbor? Is it the competitor? So it's the same way in reverse for movies. You go to a movie site and you see a bunch of uh, positive reviews for a movie that's mediocre. You wonder if the studio has a bunch of high school kids on their phones giving it good reviews to try to pump up the volume.
Yeah, and that's why I think the sites like Talkback or soon to be Pulp Epic and Chud and Ain't It Cool News back when it first started, you know, they offered valid opinions, not necessarily from the reviewers, but from the people who went there. I tend to trust people who comment, time after time that you get to know, their opinion more than, some anonymous douchebag that, leaves some kind of bullshit review.
And they're not accountable, but they're kind of accountable if they're a continuing contributor. And I agree. And you don't have to agree with everything somebody says. And I'll use the obvious example of Ebert. I didn't always agree with Ebert, but he was a pretty good litmus test for whether a movie was good or whether a movie wasn't good. If you find somebody online that you read that you don't have to agree with them all the time, but they might be the person you want to look at. And I think if you find somebody that's a contributor and who does that fairly often, somebody that does it once a month really can't help you. That's a lot more important though than a Rotten Tomatoes or a Metacritic. I mean, Rotten Tomatoes there's been some films in the last 2 or 3 years that had high ratings. It just leaves you scratching your head thinking, I never have to go there again because the ratings are ridiculous. And this Metacritic uh, scandal that's out right now is kind of the same way. Why would I go there and look at these numbers if the numbers are skewed?
And I don't even go to Metacritic. I mean, I know of it and I've been there maybe once or twice, but it it's just a nonsense site. Now, what I don't understand is what the problem is with the game Destiny. That's what the big hullabaloo is about, right?
Yeah, the game Destiny, it's the, I guess, the biggest release so far on the next gen systems. And it's just the user reviews have been not kind. There's been talk that even there's organized organized downvoting on this particular game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, it's just like American Idol when everybody gets together and calls to vote the person on that shouldn't be on.
That happened with Spore, which was
Oh
the game put
yes,
out by Will Wright,
yes.
and but the reasoning behind that was because of um,
DRM.
the DRM. Thank you. I couldn't think of
You're
the
right.
letters.
The always on internet connection that Spore required.
Yep. Yeah, and now that's actually, you know, it's actually a surprise when a game doesn't need an internet connection.
Yeah, it's becoming the way of the future. And speaking of way of the future, let's move on to the next topic. HBO is considering making the jump to direct consumer with their HBO Go app. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Dio,
More HBO. It's got to be good.
you think so?
I know about 3 people that do not have HBO but got to watch Game of Thrones through the HBO Go app. So I can't vote down on it until I see the negatives.
Scott?
I think it's a great idea. I don't have HBO, so I have to find alternative means to watch Game of Thrones and stuff. This can only be good for HBO. The cable companies are going to hate it, and I wouldn't be surprised if the cable companies try and keep HBO from doing that, because HBO, Showtime, Stars, I mean, those are some of the main reasons to get cable. I mean, outside of the other bullshit channels, but I mean, those are the premium things. And if you take a premium product like HBO and let them go off and do their own thing, cable companies aren't going to be real happy about that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Are we looking at perhaps oversaturation with HBO Go, with Amazon Prime, with Netflix, with Hulu? Is the field becoming too crowded with all this stuff, Scott?
Competition, is excellent, and the thing about it is, it's only going to provide the consumer better options and hopefully better bargains. I mean, it used to be it was just HBO and that's all there was, or Showtime. And now you've got all these other things, and the streaming. I think it's a good time to be a viewer, and I can't see anything wrong with having too many, because the good will rise and the bad will fall. And I watch Hulu once in a while, but I stopped because even with the Hulu Plus, when you pay a fucking monthly fee, you still see commercials. Now, I don't mind that on like cable, but god damn it, if I'm watching it on my phone, I don't want to have my bandwidth taken up with their commercials.
I agree. And I think what we're seeing is the beginnings of a seismic shift in our entertainment. And hopefully, what is a shift in the quality of our entertainment. I think we're in kind of a almost golden age of television right now. If you look at the quality of programs that AMC's churned out, FX, HBO, and the networks are going to be karaoke contests and reality shows, and HBO and Netflix and some of these other companies are going to be turning out uh, higher quality programming. Um, and I think this is the first. I think we're just now seeing the tip of the iceberg, and I think this may be as big as when cable came in, and the vast majority of people went from watching three networks to watching cable. I can't tell you. I didn't have cable for about 4 years. I didn't have cable for about 4 years. And once I got it and I got Netflix and I started discovering television shows that weren't horrible, it completely changed my viewing habits. So my movie watching has went way down. And my watching television shows like the Game of Thrones and Mad Men and True Detective and, you know, Justified, uh, Breaking Bad, the list goes on and on. That's the future of television, folks. The companies like HBO have figured out if they give you quality, you reward them with 23 million viewers.
Well,
Think
and
about
and
think about that. I hate to interrupt. There's a show about dragons that had 23 million viewers on a Sunday night. That's
uh,
changing that's changing the paradigm.
oh yeah, Sundays used to be the no man's land.
Exactly.
And all this started, oddly enough, with MP3s. When music started going digital, and this is going back to Napster and stuff like that, the movie companies were kind of looking at that and figuring out, well, what are we going to do? You know, because it was so much easier, and it still is, to pirate, MP3s and digital music. And unfortunately, I think the movie industry, really screwed everything up, for them. They started with the DVD, the VHS tapes, the DVDs, and the Blu-rays. Now they're just getting into the streaming, but they probably should have started with the streaming from the beginning.
So you're saying that perhaps piracy kind of taught people how to be ready for streaming without having to explain to customers?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Blockbuster Video buys Netflix. We're not having this conversation.
Yeah, that's true.
And they had the chance. They could have been streaming movies 12 years ago, and they decided to go in a different direction. And that
Right.
direction was out of business.
Yeah.
And Blockbuster started the streaming, but it was too late and it was too expensive. And they didn't have the selection that Netflix had. Netflix really had, and still does to an extent, a chokehold on the movies. They may not have them for as long a period of time, because I remember when Netflix started, there was none of this stuff of, well, watch it now before it's not going to be on here anymore. And now I'm seeing that on an almost monthly basis of movies and shows that are no longer going to be on Netflix for a period of time. Kind of like how Disney releases their movies, every 10, 15 years.
That's a good point, and they do it because it works.
Yep.
Well, Blockbuster leads us into another company that's perhaps its glory days are behind it. Sony is going to reboot I Know What You Did Last Summer with writer and director Mike Flanagan, who did Absentia and Oculus. Do we care what they did last summer again?
Oh fuck no. I didn't even care the first time. It the Fisherman was never really a particularly iconic killer to me. I just thought the whole movie kind of blew. But but I'm not surprised it's getting a reboot because I mean, what's not? Everything is a fucking reboot now, or a remake, or a sequel. So that was just a matter of time.
I think that maybe we will, the cup runneth over on the reboots and the sequels. Eventually, people are going to have to stop spending their money to see this garbage, or the companies will just keep churning them out. Personally, I hope they spend $100 million on I Know What You Did Last Summer reboot. I hope they get Jennifer Love Hewitt back. I hope she's giving everybody hand jobs in it. I think that they should just spend $100 million on it, and hopefully it'll be a failure, and Sony will get so cash strapped that they can start considering selling Spider-Man back to Marvel.
Round 2. Scott, Tom Hiddleston starring in a King Kong origin movie? Yes or no?
No.
Dio?
I'm not into King Kong, but honestly, at this point, I'll watch Tom in anything. Yes.
Matt Damon and Paul Greengrass are returning to the Bourne franchise. Do we care?
No.
I'm going to say yes, just so I don't have to see the trailer with Jeremy Renner's face in it. Because
Okay.
not like Matt Damon that much, but my goodness, he's better than Jeremy Renner.
Okay. I'll change my note to a yes, just because of the James Renner thing.
Yes, I got one.
All right, Captain America 2, supposedly Punisher was in it. Do we care? Do we care to see Punisher in the Marvel Cinematic Universe at all? Scott?
No, the Punisher needs his own decent movie for once.
Yeah.
The Punisher is just a little bit too dark for a Marvel release, to be put in with somebody else. Punisher's his own thing.
RJD?
I agree with Scott in principle, and I would love to see Thomas Jane return and make a good Punisher film, which is exactly what Scott said. But there's one reason why you establish the Punisher, not only in the cinematic Marvel universe, but in the Captain America franchise. It's because there is two or three great scenes in Marvel Civil War that the Punisher has with Captain America that almost makes the whole Civil War thing worth doing. It's not a good comic, it's not a good saga, but I think it could be a great movie, and I think you could get some great scenes out of the dynamic of the Punisher and Captain America, and they may just co-op those for a regular Captain America movie. Um, so if it leads to a larger cinematic universe and possibly a Civil War film in 6 years, uh, I'm for that.
All right. It's 2014. Are we sick of Star Wars rumors already? Scott?
Oh, well, anybody who knows me knows what my feelings are about Star Wars. So I'm going to say yes. I could give less than a rat's part about Star Wars.
I'm sick of the false rumors. I'm sick of the Luke turns to the dark side. Luke's hand gets cloned. Vader gets cloned. Vader's son shows up. Uh, it's just to me, it's just garbage, and it's it's what they do. It's what they did with Star Trek. It's what Bad Robot does, but they shouldn't. They should not be doing this with Star Wars. You don't need to create interest in Star Wars. You keep your mouth shut and you play the John Williams score before the trailer, and that's all the interest you got to do because kids will come and buy. What they're doing with people like me is I've already decided that I'm probably not going to see it at the theater, and I may not even see it on DVD. You know, I didn't buy a ticket for two of the prequels. Um, what they're doing is they're alienating people. It's not creating more interest; it's alienating people, and I don't think creating false rumors is the way that you promote your product.
All right.
He's not Khan. I promise he's not Khan.
You're talking about J.J. Abrams' mystery box. He did a talk about that. They're developing the mystery box, right? I mean,
Bad Robot.
Lost, all
Same
that. Yeah.
same rumors that with Star Trek, his Star Trek films. The same rumors with Cloverfield. The same rumors with the spider in the train with the little kids movie. Same rumors. I mean, they weren't the same rumors, but it's the same concept. They weren't like rumors about Cloverfield that Luke's hand was floating around.
Well, that's his PR. That's his modus operandi. That's how he operates. He'll do that for every movie. Create that mystery box or do something. But like you said, it's the same with every movie that he's done, and I don't see that changing in the near future because it's worked for him.
All right.
It's worked to a certain extent. I think the Star Trek films could have been much more profitable if they would have been quality.
That could be. The final question, and Dio, you're playing catch up here, so you got to come strong for this one. HBO, in the history of television, is it the greatest network ever?
Absolutely. It's not even close. You could say it's the greatest. You could say it's the greatest on literally 4 or 5 shows, but to think that the network that had First and 10 and Fraggle Rock is now the greatest of all time is mind-boggling. But The Sopranos changed the way we viewed television, and Game of Thrones is revolutionizing the way we see television. And if True Detective wasn't the best new program in 5 years, I'll eat a hat. So that's all I got.
Scott?
It's the greatest network of all time.
Oh, wow. Scott?
Yeah, and I'll disagree with that. I think probably CBS, and maybe not today, but if you look back at their history, They had the George Burns Show. They had I Love Lucy, Father Knows Best, The Honeymooners, Dennis the Menace, The Andy Griffith Show, Gilligan's Island, Hazel, Green Acres. Classic shows. The Bob Newhart Show, All in the Family, MASH, The Mary Tyler Moore Show. I mean, if you look back, these are iconic shows, and they set the standard in comedy and drama for what HBO has built on. Without CBS or NBC or ABC, for that matter, there would be no HBO.
Come on, Scott, live in the now.
Well, I'm going to interject for a second, if I could.
I'll give you MASH. It was a good show.
Oh, I got to agree with Scott. I don't think HBO is the greatest network of all time because we never finished Deadwood and you canceled Carnival. Come on now.
I get that all the time.
That's true. And Rome, don't forget.
Oh,
Rome.
yes.
And Rome gave us Game of Thrones. But they couldn't afford the third season of Rome. They couldn't afford another season of Carnival. But let me tell you, no other channel had the guts to put programs like that on and pave the way for the kind of great programs we're watching now. And I agree with you, Abe. Carnival was fantastic, and so was Rome.
Okay. Well, that's the end of the Supernaughts, and Scott's in the lead. He just bested Dio by 2 points.
Well, before you cut me off, I'll just say I never liked Andy Griffin.
Oh. Scott, you've got the last word. The mic is all yours.
Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about Kickstarters for a moment. We're all familiar with the Kickstarter from He Who Shall Not Be Named and the debacle that has ensued from that. When Kickstarter first came out, I thought it was really a great thing. And then I start seeing people like Zach Braff and Spike Lee, begging for money to make their new movies. I see independent is being kind, self-published writers putting things up on Kickstarter, help me write this book. What, if you don't get the money, you're not going to write the fucking book? Get out of here. There's stuff that I've seen for hardware for phones. The Bitsy is a good one, which was a little thing that you stick in the headset piece on your phone, and you could click it, and it would take a picture or something like that. Well, the shit's not working, and it had been delayed for months and months, and finally, when it did come out, it was like $25, and there's a company in China that's selling the same damn thing for $2 a piece. Kickstarter just really needs to go, and that's my rant.
Thank you for listening to the Supernaughts, fandom's only debate show. Again, our guests today were Scott Colbert, RJD, and I'm your host, Slate Fist Crunch.